Hello, this video is an introduction into the research presentation assignment in Unit 5. This is one of two videos that will be really helpful in moving you forward in understanding the expectations for this assignment. So you're being asked to research and write a report on either a satirical author or a persuasive author. The second piece of this project is to make sure that you're doing so following the MLA guidelines. And the second video will go a little bit deeper into what that means. Option A is to write about a satirical author. So in this course so far, you would have studied both Jonathan Swift and Mark Twain. And so you can choose to do your research and report on them, or you can do it on a more modern, contemporary satirical author, such as Samantha Bee, Matt Groening, John Oliver, or someone like that. Your second option is to do a persuasive writer. So for example, you would have studied The Speech by Elie Wiesel, so you could choose to do your report on him, or to investigate another persuasive writer. If you are happening to look at someone who is also a speech writer, make sure that they are the one who actually wrote that speech, because often political figures will deliver speeches that they did not in fact write themselves, so just make sure that they are the authors of those speeches. Once you decide who you're going to write about, here's some things to sort of keep in mind. This is not an essay, so this is going to look a lot different than what you've handed in class so far. This is instead more of an informational report. You are doing research and creating a report about that person. While doing so, you should not include any personal feelings about the author or about any of their works that you happen to be talking about within your paper. This should be an unbiased presentation of facts based on what you're going to be discovering through your research. Most importantly is you need to be using your own voice as much as possible to share what you have learned about your subject. So this is really tricky because we're doing a bunch of research about someone we may not know, so we need to make sure we get our own knowledge base so that we can use our own voice rather than using the voices of the research articles that we're using. So even with proper in-text citations for borrowed ideas and quotes, your report must not be a series of copies and pastes or shuffled content. So this is where MLA guidelines come in. This is where using your own voice comes in. You're being expected to go online and learn about a person that perhaps you don't know anything about, and then you're going to start writing about them. And we want to make sure that it means that you are not just looking up articles, copying lines and throwing them into your paper, because that's not your own voice. We need to make sure that you're using proper citations, which again, that'll be covered a little bit more clearly in the second video. So a really good rule of thumb is the 60 to 80% rule. When you sit down to write your paper, 60 to 80% of the sentences or paragraphs that you create should be in your own voice. They should be not copied and pasted lines or even summarized, rephrased lines that you found in your research. As I said previously, this is going to look a little bit differently than the essays you've been submitting in the course so far. So these are the 5 things that need to be in your report. The first is a brief examination of the author's life. So early life, their family, their education, or anything else that you think is relevant. Then you need to include the general historical context of the time. So what was happening in society during that author's lifetime? For satirical and persuasive writers, this often influences what they write about. What's happening in society is influencing the topics that they are writing about. So it's really important that we understand what's happening around them at that time, either within their own communities, their own countries, or maybe even in the world. You're also going to want to include other major works that this author may have created and the tone of those works. Are they also satirical? Are they also persuasive? And why or why not? You need to include at least one image of the author, and you need to include at least one other opinion of the author. So what do other writers think of them? What does society think of them? What did people think of them back then if they are a historical figure, and what do they think about them now? And what are they saying about their importance to our society? So there's lots of ways that we can find other opinions of authors. Yes, we might be able to find a newspaper article. Yes, we might be able to find an online article. But this is an area where maybe you can go onto an Instagram account and see what some comments are. So just starting to get an idea of what another opinion of the author is. So, like I said, it is not an essay format, so you can choose how to format it. It's going to be in more of a report style. So perhaps you're going to choose to have headings. Perhaps you're going to choose to have 5 different headings and then have a paragraph under each of those headings explaining each of these parts of your project. Or you can decide to organize it in another way. Just know, again, we are not looking for an essay. We are looking for an organized presentational report. So what you're going to want to do is sit down and do the research first. So that means that you're going to be looking for lots of different information from lots of different resources about your author. And once you're done your research and you've taken notes and you've learned more, you're going to sit down and try and write your paper, or at least each content area that was previously mentioned on the last slide, from memory. That's going to allow you to use your own voice. You're going to sit down, write from memory. After that, you can go and check your research against what you've written. Anything that you need to fix, any dates you need to add, any specific quotes you want to add, that's where you're going to start looking at making use of citation. So that's where you're borrowing any wording or any ideas that you found in your research that you want to replicate within your report. Okay? So anything that's become your own knowledge base that you could write without looking at the internet, without looking at your research, that doesn't look anything like a sentence that can be found within your research, that is considered your own voice. You have created your own knowledge base about that person. That's your voice speaking. Anytime you're including a really detailed event, dates, or again, anything like a direct quote, that's when you're going to start looking at citations. Again, as previously mentioned, a big part of this project or assignment is to show an awareness of the requirements of the correct MLA documentation style. Again, that's going to be shown in the next video. So kind of as the last thing is it's a really good approach to do your research. If you're just looking at one article at a time and writing your paper, you're likely not going to end up using your own voice. Make sure that you're taking your notes using a variety of credible sources. You should be looking at using at least a minimum of 5 different sources for your research. That could be a YouTube video. It could be a blog post. It could be articles. It could be images. It could be lots of different things. Just make sure you're keeping track of where you're getting certain information from when it comes to the citation piece of the assignment. We're asking you to try and avoid relying on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a reliable source because anybody can add or delete from Wikipedia. So we're never sure if it's actually true, accurate information. Lastly, the library is a great resource at Norquest, so feel free to reach out to the website itself or any of the librarians that work there. So this is just an introduction to the assignment. The next video, as I previously said, is going to talk about the citation piece. I'm just going to show you one more thing on the actual Moodle page. So this is what your assignment looks like on the Moodle page. All of these things are the things we just talked about, okay? Down here is some additional assignment guidelines, so make sure you have a look at those. Once you've finished your report, make sure you've got all those things before you hand it in, okay? Down here are some resources for you to use. This next video that I'm encouraging you to watch is the introduction video to MLA guidelines. It's going to go over kind of what are these things that we're talking about, in text, full text citations. It's also going to give you some hints and clues specifically to some of the stuff that we know you will probably be using in your research and give you an idea of how and where to find how to do this process. This video will also talk about these last 4 resources. And as always, there's a rubric. So you're being graded on your content, your organization, your research and citation, and your presentation. So research and citation is its own full mark. So that's why we want to make sure that you understand the MLA guidelines. As always, if you have any questions about the assignment, reach out to instructor. Other than that, happy researching.